The meeting is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for coming. I'm told that so far we have a quorum for the executive board, so until we get a full quorum, there's a few things on the full commission quorum, there's a few things on the agenda that we can't deal with. They'll get pushed off to our next meeting, but there's lots of other good juicy stuff that we can. I think we're going to skip introductions. And public comment. So let's see. I have two on public comment. So Jim Nowacki from Gary. Got your timer?
I do.
Excellent.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Jim Nowacki. I'm a resident of the city of Gary, Indiana. I'd like to first offer the commissioners my wishes that you find many things to be thankful for and to share thanks next Thursday. I'd also like to congratulate communities in the region that were identified as safest communities in our state by a poll that was published. And I know they're all well deserved. But I do want to speak about some conditions that exist in our city that are a direct result of actions taken by the Commission. Last Tuesday, I was at a meeting of the Gary Common Council, and in the public comment portion, I had complained about the construction work that was done on Route 12 and 20 and along Broadway, and the errors, omissions, and the overall shabbiness of the product. The president of the council had, in his comments, in response to me, said that he's been working with the state along for the Broadway project. And as they identify problems that are obvious in that project, that they're working to have those repaired, addressing them. But the problem is this, that we spend an awful lot of money. It's about a $15 million project. The state has engineers that are embedded in those projects. I don't know how many communities have to then ride herd over the alleged professionals who are producing these products in their communities. But I can tell you that on the Broadway project, it's already falling apart. They had tried to pave that last November and December. Obviously, didn't work. They had all the previous year to work on it. They didn't do the work. Now here it is 2 years later, and we're still addressing problems from that project. I bring to the Commission's attention that on the 1220 project, I've been here for 5 years complaining about the flooding. This floods an entire lane of traffic on a very busy truck route in northwest Indiana. And although some monies have been allocated for that project, we still haven't seen the problem completed. Over 5 years later, we're still fussing with that 1220 project. 2 years later, we're still trying to catch up with the problems and the errors on the Broadway project. I think someone has to hold INDOT accountable for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the public comment is David Wright from Gary.
Yes, we're going to go around here. Good morning to the executive board. I would be making these comments if my general manager, Darrell Lampkins, were in the office, but with his not being available, he asked me to come in here and follow up on a meeting and some decisions made at the Technical Planning Commission meeting that I believe are agenda item 8.7. What I'd just like to do is express a prediction that there are going to be some anticipated enhancements made to that decision. It's a very important decision, but we've already identified some issues that were talked about on Tuesday and have been talked about on Wednesday with staff here at NERC. I just wanted to make the commission aware of several of those things. Some of them are a bit more important than others, but specifically, you're going to be approving a notice of funding availability that has criteria with no metrics. That's one thing specific to the transit agency and transit criteria, where we've got an idea where I believe the metrics were supposed to be put together before the criteria was put together, but that didn't happen. But the criteria is still in there, so we're actually going to be having projects graded on metrics that don't exist yet. Now, I'm not saying that any needs to be removed from here at this meeting, but we are going to have to come back and make some corrections to that. There are programming rules that are also involved that, at least in the opinion of this particular transit designated recipient, don't rate or grade projects, but grade and rate how agencies actually do their work. GPTC is the subrecipient of NERC, and we do different things that are different from NERC. Things are being put in the programming rules that dictate how we perform business, how we perform service changes, how we perform procurements. And programming rules apparently aren't something that we can change. So that's going to be something that we're going to need the Technical Planning Committee and the Executive Board or the full board to address. But we will be requesting that comes back to you in January. What I think is the most egregious issue, however, is the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program and the allocation of target funds for that program. Instead of an omnibus request for proposals, the NOFA will be identifying targets based on project type. Just a comparison. In 2015, the last CMAQ NOFA, 40% of the funds allocated went to some very important transit projects. A project in Valparaiso that's going to be providing access between Valparaiso and the Porter Hospital. Continuing the transit by North Township, which is a lifeline for Dollar Ride customers in Hammond. And the Raleigh Metro Express. We expected a 16% increase in ridership when the BMX was first written. We got a 40% increase. So these are very important transit projects that are very important to the region and to our communities. The funding target for transit projects of that type, again, 40% in 2015, 12.5% for this NOFA. That's a decision that the TPC and the Executive Board are going to have to affect. It's not just, in my opinion, a step backwards. It's not just an oversight. That's a possible findable finding at the federal level, at least in my opinion, when it comes to intermodal planning. That's how egregious we think that is. GPTC is going to be bucking a national trend in 2018. We're going to be posting an increase in ridership in transit. That's something that's not happening nationwide. Seattle's doing it. Houston's seeing an increase. They're doing it because they made investments in their transit system. And up here,
That's a question.
go ahead.
Why isn't Daryl here if he's in charge of GPTC, if this is such an egregious thing? I mean, isn't that his job?
That's his job, and we just discussed this, and these are the board.
Like, I tell you what, if there was something that was egregious running the city of Hammond, I wouldn't send my chief of staff. No offense.
Understood, but we haven't had a chance to call him yet, and we got a lot of serious.
Probably skeptical then.
Right.
Probably skeptical, okay? Because I think if they're, I mean, you're looking at a bunch of mayors and executives here,
Mhm.
and this is really threatening, and this is really egregious, and so egregious they sent the number 2 person to talk to us.
I wish I was number 2, first person.
Makes it even worse.
Right. I do agree. I do understand. But we wanted to make sure that the issue was brought to the attention of the board. We made some investments. Hammond made investments in transit. Lake County made investments in transit. The city of Gary made investments in transit. That's why we are having an increase this year. Our opinion is the way the NOFA and the funding targets are assembled now are going to threaten that momentum.
I have to stop you because
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for your public comment. Thank you, Jim. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion from the executive board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. Any against? Nope. Great, thank you. Minutes approved. Report of the executive director. Ty, service awards. You want to start with that?
I'd love to start with that.
Well, here, let me help you. So, one of the certificate of appreciation awards
I see
is for somebody in recognition of 5 years of service. So that would be you. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I didn't even know I was going to be getting it. Okay, so we've got three, as you know, NERC's most valuable asset, as I know you appreciate, is NERC staff. I know you would say that about the staff in your own municipalities and counties as well. So we have some recognitions, as we often do, to recognize these 5-year milestones. We have 3 today. I don't know whether to start with and move my way. Let's start with the least number of years. That would be exciting. So Scott Weber is also 5 years. Congratulations, Scott. Here, make this a little bit easier. Thank you, sir. Well done. And then Gabriel Martinez is after 10 years. Believe it or not. Thank you, Dan. And then last but certainly not least, at a big whopping 15 years of trail development in Northwest Indiana, Mitch Barloga. Smile for that. Everybody else is. He's working. Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it. And the, whatever do I say? The most impactful, I guess, that's probably the wrong word to use, but in terms of longevity, doesn't get a certificate, but they've been here such a good long period of time, they get a whole cake. And that would be Jody Melton, who's back here, who is retiring at the end of this year. And we realized this is the last commission meeting before his retirement. Jody, you might as well stand up, Jody.
Yeah.
That's great.
And they came from Cedar Lake.
There you go. Bob's just saying.
I was teaching in Hanover 37 years ago this month, and I left to come to Highland. So I'm one of the last of the Highland people who's nursing employees.
There you go. Well, thank you, Jody. There literally is cake outside. So, and as you know, just to back up a little bit for those that do not know Jody, Jody is the executive director of the Kankakee River Basin Commission, which has been housed here at NERC, but he's been a stalwart NERC presence for these many years, so he will be sorely missed. But he's got a well-deserved retirement coming up. So there literally is cake. After this meeting, when we adjourn, we will be going right out to this to imbibe. Is that the right word for cake? So that's great. Partake. Thank you. Let's find something else. We are not going to do that.
Mr. Chairman, could I add that Jody has filled in on various committees through these many 38 years and led us in small towns and cities, economic development, Marina Commission, just to name a few, and also helped us work through probably 15 different record floods in Northwest Indiana. So every 2 to 3 years we have these record floods in the south end of our counties. And Jody's been a facilitator of getting us help, getting relief in, saving people's lives, their homes, and their agricultural fields. So thank you.
Excellent. So please do join us for cake afterwards and spend some time talking with Jody, who will regale you with many tales of the Kankakee. Lastly, on my bit, as we just recognized staff and their service, their work has also continued to be recognized. We received yet another 4th award for the Green Ways and Blue Ways 2020 plan, which was just received last week at the Indiana Association of Regional Councils. So again, thanks to Mitch Barloga and Kathy Luther for their project management on that effort. 4 awards, national as well as state, and so we're very, very pleased about that, and thank you for all your participation in developing this really good groundbreaking document. And as my segue over to Jeff, as at the Indiana Association of Regional Councils, Jeff was there too accepted because he was also the keynote speaker last week. And we really appreciate him doing that. Gave a fantastic talk to the regional councils all across the state and even closed it up with some, I'm guarantee that has never happened before. And I don't know if it will happen since, but displayed his musical talents as well. So very well done, and thank you. That would be a good handoff, I think.
Sure. Excellent. Yeah, so it was fun to go down there and talk to them and tell them some about all the great work that we're doing up here and helping each other out. The two announcements I have is a nominating committee. We're at the end of my run, and so the nominating committee will be the 4 officers, and we'll meet either after today or via phone to set up a slate for the January meeting. Speaking of meetings, Ty and I this year have tried to thin down some of the meetings and trying to figure out which was more important, the things that were on the agenda or the meeting, and which one led to the other. And so we are offering up for the consideration of the executive board to change the meetings to the legislation states that we have to have 4 quarterly meetings, or 4 meetings a year, and then the executive board can meet as needed. So it's every month unless we don't want to. And so what we're proposing is that what we establish is the 4 full commission meetings and no other meetings unless they are needed for the commission or the executive. And so that is our proposal. That is my proposal. And these have to be advertised by January. And so we would see less of each other. Okay, thank you. We would see less of each other, but the agendas would be more full, and we'd be timely on our TIP amendments and other things. So that's the proposal, and I would entertain a motion to accept the meeting. Moved. Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? You're knitting your eyebrows.
I don't think all of the executive board meetings are necessary, but I don't think all of them are unnecessary either, you know?
But it's
I mean, like in June and July, it sucks pretty bad coming here, you know, it's 85 degrees. Right, today I don't mind being here, it's funny. I don't know, I mean, so I don't want to have like 4-hour meetings at the full commission meeting either.
I don't think they will be, but so in trying to figure out how to do this, we have to advertise, but when we cancel them, we have to advertise, we have to notify everybody that they've been canceled. And so it's which way do you do it? So do you guarantee that there's going to be one every month and then undo them, or not guarantee it and only notify when it's necessary? And so that's what we're trying, and if it doesn't work, we can
Because
change it.
when you think about it, so what, 12 executive board members or 16? 11? Okay, so for 11 people to do business in a 2-hour meeting, and then you have the full board show up, instead we're going to have 4 really long full board meetings, and quote unquote inconvenience a lot more people than the executive board who shows up pretty regularly, you know? I don't know. I'm old fashioned, I guess. I just like, we've done business for a long time, and it's a pretty dramatic change.
It is, but that, if you'll recall this year, there's been a bunch of them canceled that I joked that I'm trying to keep my perfect attendance going, so if I can't make a meeting, I just whack it. But
Am I the only one who feels this way? I mean,
No, I actually have a concern about public input being eliminated that many times during the year.
he speaks at every.
I think that if we only meet 4 times, that means 4 times that somebody can come and address the commission. And I really think that they need more opportunities to address us, and they need more opportunities to hear them. So I guess it's a public input question that I have. I'm just a little concerned that those items would not be brought up in a timely manner because we wouldn't be meeting but 4 times.
To Mr. Tutt's point, you know, Mr. Novaki speaks at every meeting, In fact, he wasn't at the last NERC meeting, we almost did a wellness check on him. But I mean, for people like Mr. Nowacki, you know, he comes out here every meeting and tells us what whether we want to hear it or not. I mean, I think Mr. Fred's point is a very good point.
I'm just concerned about public transparency.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would it be possible, and would those who have concerns be comfortable with a 6-meeting-a-year schedule?
Something
Would that be more?
So maybe
It's
2
an
out of every 3
improvement.
months. Right. Maybe like 2 out of every 3 months or 6, I mean, so we have a couple of executive board meetings, just take care of business. I mean, summertime's slower anyway, right, Ty? It really does seem like it slows down a lot of the construction's taking place.
We've struggled with quorums, you know.
Yes, I understand that. I'm not insensitive to the point. I take the point. It's just that I believe that as a public agency, we have a responsibility to give the public an opportunity to see us function and for them to address us in like manner.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't catch your reasoning. Why can't you publish the meeting at the beginning of the year, that these are our meetings set, which everyone knows is the 3rd Thursday of the month? And then I didn't catch your reasoning of what it takes to cancel a meeting.
The notice, so it's,
So are you talking about just an email notice that goes out?
We have to do the full notification that we do for the meetings regardless. So whether we have the meeting or we cancel the meeting, we do
Yeah,
the
but-
same notification.
I know in our local level, we announce our meeting day. Everyone knows that our meeting days are the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. And we advertise that at the beginning of the year, that that's when our meetings are. Now, do we cancel some meetings along the way? Yes, we do. But I guess I would have to agree with Mayor Tom and Jim over there about the transparency. You don't get the chance of coming to a public meeting with special meetings. I think 4 times a year would be, mostly for this committee, would be very shallow on meetings.
Mr. Chairman, I love NERC meetings. I'm a dork. We have meetings, like a lot of times you'll have the RDA come in here and do a presentation, and everybody comes to the press is here. We have multiple, and just because it's an executive board meeting, we always have people from the full board here. We may not have a full quorum, but we have a lot of people from other communities that show up, and the media comes, and the people come, and we talk about the South Shore expansion, or we talk about, it's recorded on TV, we talk about the Klein Avenue Bridge. I mean, how often do people from all over Northwest Indiana get together? I think this is unique and powerful, and I think if we start taking away, then we only have 4 times a year, people are gonna forget about us too. I think that's an important point.
Well, I think you lose some impact too of your decision making. Well, you know, when we've got to wait till from January to April to go in and have our decision made. I don't know. I think it would be possible to maybe schedule executive board meetings in between the full commission meetings and then put them as optional.
Yeah. One more point, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. In my opinion, I have feelings about NERC. I think that the committees have gotten a little too powerful, in my opinion, because this is where the power is. It's the elected officials, the full board, it's the executive board. We've had experiences with the committee structure where they've gotten a little out of control, and actually you hear people telling us from the committees what we need to do. I'm not really cool with that. I think if we meet fewer and fewer times, we're empowering these committees, and they're going to be even more involved. And quite frankly, I think we need to check the committees a little bit more with this board. I don't really want to give any more power away. I think that's a good point to make also.
So that's the point I raised in the meeting.
Yes, sir.
I'll agree with Tom Schmidt from Schererville. Cedar Lake puts a schedule out for the entire year, and that will be out in December. And then if we meet, we cancel meetings too. And like I'm going to bring up today about school buses and people blowing the signs. I'll discuss that a little bit later.
I was just asked to give at least some of the staff perspective on this, and none of these 2 things I'm going to say affect the argument you just made. It's just so you get a fuller picture of part of the thinking in it anyway, at least in trying it. Some of the feedback I've gotten since we've gone into our committee structure is there's almost meeting burnout. We have the committees meeting too frequently, too often, from just a staff perspective. As you know, it takes time to prepare agendas, to write up minutes, and that sort of thing. So part of that is trying to address that issue. And then the other thing that we realized, Jeff alluded to this earlier, is that, as you know, we usually almost always have tip amendments on the agendas. But we started realizing, are those getting put on the agenda because we're having a meeting, or are we having a meeting because we have to have a tip amendment approved? And actually, we're on a quarterly cycle for everything anyway, for the tips. So the tip amendments were only getting on the agenda because we were having a meeting, and they really didn't need to be on there. So there wasn't a driving focus. I mean, in terms of schedule, again, it's not addressing what you're bringing up. But in terms of things that have to happen in the regular cycle of what we approve, there was no reason to have the regular monthly meeting. It was quarterly was sufficient. And as we worked it through on staff, figured out that that actually works fine with our processes. So the idea, if we went to this or tried this out, is the committees themselves would, as they already meet basically when they need to meet, but everything would fall into that quarterly cycle of what meetings need. Again, it doesn't address the issues that you raise. I'm just saying that's the staff thing.
Mr. Chairman,
It doesn't.
I agree with the meeting burnout. There's a lot of meetings that take place there, but if we're gonna reduce meetings, I don't think you reduce these meetings. I think you reduce the meetings in the subcommittees, in the committees, and we keep meeting. I think it's good when we all get together.
I think so too.
So there's been a motion and it's been seconded and we've discussed. So the options are to take a vote or to, remove the second and the motion. And I'm comfortable with any of the above.
I didn't make a motion or the second, so I can't remove my motion.
Well, your second has to come on first.
Second first.
Second is removed. The motion is removed, and so that's fine. And so at this point, until further notice, the schedule would be the same and be canceled as needed. Is that okay?
I'm fine.
Or it's not needed, right, in reverse.
If there's no need for a meeting, I would support that totally.
Okay, but,
In the interest of transparency, I think we need to schedule a meeting and cancel it if we don't need it.
and I welcome and thank you guys for the discussion, because to me, in the interest of transparency, I think everybody's made some really good points. And I like energy as well.
It's your second round through.
So thank you, and thanks for the discussion. So now, moving on to the Finance and Personnel Committee, George?
The Finance and Personnel Committee met this morning. We exercised financial oversight, procurement, budget development, and personnel policies over the commission operations, and establishes more detailed accounts. We had met this morning, and at this point, Daria Stava will present the 2019 budget.
Yeah, hold on, let me interrupt for a minute. So we do not have a full commission, and so we can't make an action on 6.1 or 6.3. So the only thing we can approve is 6.2 today.
It would be my suggestion that we go ahead and present the budget, and the executive board would take the action of recognizing it and recommending its approval to the full commission. So we've got some substance going forward to the full commission.
Okay.
Although your chairman's right, we can't approve either of those two things. That statutorily is uniquely preserved for the full commission.
Resolution 18-24 in your packet.
Okay, good morning. We are seeking approval to oversee fiscal year 2019 budget. Please refer to page 8, which is attachment A. It's a summary of the expenses, operating expenses, and capital budget for our subrecipients, also for our revolving loan fund. That's the last item. So this page is only summary, only includes expenses. So the total expenses we estimated for 2019 of $3,653,111. For our subrecipients for capital expenses, $2,632,909 for the subrecipient operating for maintenance, $3,050,763, and we have available for the future loan amount of $85,000. Please, next page, page 9, shows more detailed information. The first part is our revenue. It's a summary by the category. Our revenue we estimated at $3,653,111, which is less by 2% versus prior year. That's the difference of $200,000 for the Burns Waterway, Grant 319, which expires in January 2019. Most categories are within the same level, so it's very comparable to the last year. And the next page, page number 10, I provided more detailed explanation of our revenues. If you want to look at more details and see what each major categories includes, and if you have any questions, please ask. If there's no questions, the next part is our expenditures, which are in more details. The first line is the salary expense, which we estimated 2% more than last year, this fiscal year. It's due to built-in merit increases for employees, which are in the range of 0 to 4%. So the median came out, or average came up of 2%. Fringe benefits increase for 2019 of 4% is due to increase high increase of the health insurance that was budgeted on the accordingly to the information we received from our health insurance brokers. Occupancy increase of 4% mostly is due to the contracts. They increase in certain percent each year, with the most increase for our utilities bill. Equipment and maintenance are increasing by 10%. I increased the computer services because we are looking for the new vendor. The current vendor contract is expiring this year. The increase of $5,000 for the computer services is due also to new security system we are wishing to buy in 2019. Departmental, which is our communication, travel, and other expenses, I kept in the same level as last year, means 0 increase due to not enough local funds for the match purposes. So I cannot draw down more funds from the federal grant because I don't have a local match. We are maxed on the $541,000 we are receiving from the local agencies. Contractuals are less than 28%. That's the $200 because our revenue have to match our expenses. The Burns Waterway Grant 319 because expired, so also I expired the expenses as well. So so I can balance. The last item on the expense list is furniture and equipment. I increased to $64,200. That includes our grant from 2016-17 that we received from FDA. We used portion for our new computer system in 2016. We still have outstanding balance that I would like to use for the new security system, cameras, keypads, and also for the sound system. and a couple new TVs for our conference rooms. This money I can use as long as I have enough local match. If I don't have a local match, I won't be able to use it. So this is our revenue versus expenses. Our budget is balanced at the ending to 0. Page 10, as I said, is the detail of our operating revenue. On page 11, we listed the outstanding 2016 and 2017 our subrecipient capital budget. On the left-hand side, you have the items they were placed in TIP, but still hasn't been purchased by our subrecipients due to different circumstances. So this is not part 19 budget, it's the part rollover from the prior years. On page 12, we have a new capital budget for our subrecipients. The subrecipients are listed on the left-hand side, the grand number, the projects, and the total amount available with the matching is $2,632,900. On page 13, we have operating budget, pass-through operating budget for our subrecipients. That's preventive maintenance and operating assistance. The total available funds, federal funds, is $3,050,763. The last page is just showing our available available amount for the new loans of $85,000. Any questions?
So George,
Anything else? We can't.
You can make a motion for recommendation.
All right, I'd like to make a motion for recommendation.
And then we will subsequently have, at the first full commission meeting, we can have ratification of the approval.
That's my motion.
I second the motion for recommendation. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, as an experienced budget officer, I just want to remind the executive board of their recommendation and the full commission will get to ratify. You're never purchasing televisions, you're always getting monitors. You need to keep that in mind.
I said televisions.
You said TVs, actually. That's okay. I heard monitor.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there any further discussion? None. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. George?
Thank you.
Okay, then, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Hobart zoning and sub-area plan, RFP 18-05-2013. Kathy Luther will make the presentation.
Yes, thank you. We secured we had a competitive procurement, which was brought before the executive board last month, and now we have selected a Lakota group to work with the city of Hobart and NERC and the DNR. We have funding from private foundations as well as the DNR Coastal Program to fund the contract. It supports both the Deep River Watershed Management Plan, which we discussed earlier, as well as a lot of natural resource planning that's been going on in the area. So we would request approval of that contract.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. 6.3, new 3-year executive director's contract and compensation. It's the duty of the chairman to recommend the process to begin. And in doing so, the chairman and I met with Mr. Hollenbeck and came up with the following information to be provided and summarized by Mr. Hollenbeck.
As George has alluded to, the Finance and Personnel Committee's responsibility is to evaluate the executive director. We are in the second year of a 3-year agreement with Ty to perform that function, role, and responsibility for us. 2019 will be the last year of that 3-year agreement. What we've traditionally done is establish a compensation for the first year and then deferred to the second and the third year to a process of evaluating his performance and coming up with a compensation amount. For this year, for 2018, Ty intervened in that process and asked that we not give him a raise. And we accommodated that request, and so Ty did not receive any salary increase for 2018. As we look to 2019, our first thought was we wanted to reestablish that 3-year cycle that we have with Ty. So the document that's in your packet by way of a proposed employment agreement with the executive director reestablishes a 3-year cycle, with the first year being established at a compensation level and the second and third year deferring to that evaluation process. The question then became, what would the group recommend? Another thing Ty said to us is he didn't want to be treated any differently than the rest of the NERC staff was being treated in the evaluation process. And that resulted in an evaluation of Ty on a scale of 1 to 5 with a corresponding percentage salary increase in that amount. Virtually all of the NERC employees are in that 2, 3, or 4% range in terms of increase as a function of performance. With that in mind, the Finance and Personnel Committee recommended that for 2019, Ty receive a 4% salary increase, and that's what's reflected in the proposal that's in your packet for his employment. The rest of the document is virtually identical to what he has been employed under in the past. Answer any questions anyone may have. Again, this is a function of the full commission, so what we would be asking for this morning is that the executive board recommend to the full commission, as the Finance and Personnel Committee is recommending, adoption of the 3-year employment agreement with our executive director with a first-year compensation reflecting a 4% increase, not from this year because there was no increase, but a 4% from 2017 for what he would be compensated for. And I can be free to leave the room.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I think Ty's outstanding. He came from outside.
Maybe you should stay.
He came from outside the area. He came to Northwest Indiana, a hard place, if you're not from here, to do business, and he's excelled. I think he's great. I wouldn't change a thing.
I would second it.
Sounds like you have a motion and a second.
I can't vote because I'm not an executive.
Oh, you're not
But I will make the second.
Okay, so you're moving and you're seconding, okay. Any further discussion? So the contract laid out this process that was supposed to take place, and we did it. The one addition is that the contract before you is added one thing that it will roll over, it will renew automatically.
We'll preserve that 3-year.
Which the one we're replacing didn't do, and so that's what we're trying to do.
I think NERC's lucky to have that.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to reinforce that the Finance and Personnel Committee did recommend approval to the full commission, so recommendation for the executive board to make the recommendation forward to the full commission.
Okay.
The full commission has 2 recommendations then for
That's
approval.
right. So all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, it's been an honor to serve.
Ty's buying dinner for everybody.
Mr. Benson, I appreciate Ty's willingness to attend events that's not necessarily required of his job position.
but you will see him at a lot of community events, things that he's not really even asked to be there, but he sees a desire to be invested in the communities, and I think that's admirable, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I'll agree with you, he attends Lake County Advancement Committee, he comes to 16 plus in Lake County, and we appreciate seeing him there.
More importantly, I play on the Sunset Hill Farm Park softball team, and he showed up for a game.
Just don't mess up.
If you keep talking, he's gonna ask for another raise.
We'll present every year.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for your continued service. Next on the agenda is the Environmental Management Policy Committee, Bill Emerson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Just a quick update on the Environmental Management Policy Committee. But before I do that, I'd also like to, on a personal level, thank Jody Melton for his years. How many years, Jody?
37.
37 years as the KRBC director. For me, coming from Hammond, I'm a Hammond guy. I knew where the Kankakee River was. That's about it before I started as a surveyor. So he was worth his weight in gold, or some metal that's more valuable than gold. So he was great during great events. You know, there's no match for having somebody who has that kind of experience. So thank you very much, Joey. Also, an update from our committee. As a lot of you know, a lot of us on the environmental committee were concerned about the chromium spill at U.S. Steel, and more importantly for our group, I think, was the response to it and some things that were kind of lacking on getting everybody on the same page when that spill happened. That we were hearing a lot about. So the EPA had a comment period on consent decree, and the EMPC submitted some comments, and as a follow-up to that, a couple months later, the EPA came in and described how they're creating a Northwest Indiana subgroup for these types of events, notifications. So it's I think it was a good result. I'm hoping they come into the full commission to give that same presentation, because there are, around the Great Lakes, there's a lot of these subgroups, but for whatever reason, Northwest Indiana didn't have one with the EPA, but they're going to have one now. So we're all very happy about that. Last month or two, we've been spending, I think it's, Kathy, 9.5 hours total on our programmatic scoring. So we took a deep dive into it, and we have a lot of environmental great minds throughout the region that gave a lot of input, and I think we're very comfortable with where we ended up. So that's great. I want to thank Mitch for his work on that and his patience with us, 9.5 hours and going through environmental air quality. So thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, Kevin Brightsky with the Technical Planning Committee.
Well, as you already heard, the Technical Planning Committee met on Tuesday, November 13th. And during the meeting, staff presented on the results of the latest round of the 2050 plan pop-up events. And there are 5 actions under consideration today that are the result of the meetings of our topical committee, EMPC. I want to thank them, their leadership, Christine Sid with the Surface Transportation, Tom Schmidt, Land Use Committee met. They all had input a lot of hours in preparing what unfortunately is a constrained budget, where we're going to have to look at a redistribution of dollars, fewer dollars, at least for the time being, so we can be responsible and fulfill our contract obligation. The first 3 actions, also I'd like to thank staff, because they obviously put a lot of time. The first 3 actions involve the approval of performance measure targets for safety, pavement, and bridge condition. And finally, system performance, freight and congestion mitigation, air quality. I want you to be mindful of, these are targets, they're not our goal. Our goal is that nobody gets hurt or killed, by the way, and that we do this all as economically feasible as we can. But the targets are a reasonable place where we need to be under. So, Scott, would you make a presentation? By the way, these are outlined in resolutions 18 to 19, 1820, and 1821, starting on page 48 of your packet.
Sure.
We will go through them one by one because we're requesting action for each of them. Starting with Resolution 1819, which is about the safety targets that can be found on pages 48 to 50 of your packets. These safety targets, as the chair of our technical planning committee just mentioned to you, are required for us to set in consultation with the Indiana Department of Transportation and other metropolitan planning organizations from around the state, have met and looked at the past 5-year trends. So when we say target, we don't mean these are our goals. Obviously, we don't want to have more fatalities. But if you look at the table on page 50, you can see what the target is for 2019 as it's been proposed. Going by the number of fatalities, the fatality rate, the number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities. Now the top 3 are slightly increasing, but the rate of serious injuries and the number of non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities are decreasing, so that is good news. So having received a positive recommendation from the Technical Planning Committee at its meeting on November 13th, the action request here is for approval. I can answer any questions if there are any.
Is there a motion?
There is.
Been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A 30-day public comment period on the draft coordinated transit plan was released on October 1st, 2018. Is James Whitaker here?
He's got to do the 20 and 21 first.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, Mr. Chair.
Resolution 1820 on pages 51 to 53 of your packet is now talking about pavement and bridge conditions. These are we're setting 2-year and 4-year targets. So you see on the table on page 53, the 2019, which is the 2-year targets, and the 2021, which is the 4-year targets for pavement and bridge conditions. These pretty much only apply on they only apply on the national highway system. So that's pretty much all INDOT-owned facilities, except for the bridges, which are county controlled. But it doesn't affect many of the municipalities in our region, but these are what the targets are. Again, we've been in consultation with INDOT throughout the process, and INDOT set these targets for the state this past May, and now being about 6 months forward, it's now our turn to decide whether or not we support these targets. So the action here is to support these targets as shown on page 53. Again, if there's any questions, please let me know.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next.
And finally, Resolution 1821 are the Federal Highway Administration performance measures relating to system performance, freight, and congestion mitigation air quality program. You can see on page 56 the table of the 2-year and the 4-year targets that have been proposed. These INDOT actually set for the state again in this past May. And we've had 6 months to decide whether or not to support the INDOT statewide targets or to set our own. The recommendation is to support the INDOT targets. Those targets were in consultation with the metropolitan planning organizations such as NERC from around the state. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions about what those targets are. Otherwise, ask for a motion.
Is there a motion to approve?
Please.
Yes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you.
I apologize for doing.
No problem.
I was intending to take all resolutions at the same time, but miscommunicated. Now for the 30-day comment period on the draft coordinated transit plan, which was released October 1st, 2018. Now James Winter will present.
Great, thank you very much. So we are presenting on the public comment report for the Coordinated Transit Plan. The Coordinated Transit Plan is a requirement for federal program 5310, that's enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. The plan is intended to make sure that we have identified regional priorities for that grant program so that we can match the needs of the communities to federal funding. However, we've worked really hard to make sure that this plan is broader than that and actually addresses the needs of all transit in the region and make those funding priorities, which are now being folded into both the NOFA and the 2050 plan. In your packet on pages 56 through 68, is the public comment report, and on pages 69 through 136 is the plan itself. I have, we destroyed a small forest in printing these off, so we didn't want to count too many, but I do have some more up here if anyone would like a copy. As you can see in our public comment report, we received 5 public comments. Most of the public comments were not significant and did not require any changes to the plan. 2 of those comments were mailed in. The other 3 were emailed in. We did receive significant comments from GPTC about some issues that they had with the plan. You can see GPTC's request and then my response, and ultimately the changes that were made. Overall, most of these comments were comments that were already incorporated into the planning document as of the meeting of the Transit Operators Roundtable, but there were some additional changes made, including expanded references to GPTC's rapid bus service. We also included enhanced language concerning the relationship of GPTC and local match and its regional services and others, which are outlined in the packet on page 60.
Thank you.
The 4th action is on Resolution 1822, adoption of the Coordinated Transit Plan. That starts in 72. James has already explained a lot of this, and the Technical Planning Committee recommends adoption of Resolution 1822.
I'll make that motion.
You can't, so we don't have a full commission,
Okay.
and so it's only the executive board.
I'd like to add that Mary Tanis was served on both the steering committee and as our liaison to the Transit Operators Roundtable, so she's been all over this plan, so thank you.
I learned a lot, I will say that, and thank you so much for your diligence. I mean, there were a lot of meetings, but I really learned so much from all those meetings, and I applaud the members of the group just being so respectful, and it was a great opportunity for everybody to learn about other people and their transit issues here in Lake County and all over. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't recognize Mary. Good work, Mary. Thank you.
I'll move the motion.
I'll make the second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you.
NERC has developed a web-based program for the public to review our transportation improvement program called RTIP. All caps, RTIP. It is available on the NERC website. Charles Bradsky will provide a demonstration of RTIP if Charles is here. Oh,
he is.
There it is. Some from before.
Okay.
Is that the Michigan City Lighthouse?
I need some help with this. Mitch?
You look so confident.
Well, while they're loading that up, not to steal any thunder, but just so you're not just staring at a screen, Charles will keep this very brief, given the other things on the agenda. But we're really thrilled to be able to get to this point of offering this region tip. This is all electronic-based tip now, just greatly enhances the ability for people to get in and see how much money is allocated to a particular project, where is it at. Anybody can tell this from anywhere at any time of day. And so it's a great addition. Takes a lot out of what used to be done on somebody's spreadsheet on their computer, and now it's available for everybody to be able to see and know exactly what's happening with projects. So,
Well, it's publicly available. It's really important for the executives in this room, for their staffs, and for their consultants, because you can look at this at any time.
So, on the NERC website, if you go to on the transportation pull down, we have a link here for the RTIP. clicking on that brings us to the RTIP public webpage. And this is what it looks like. There's also a link at the very bottom to take you back to the NERC website. But what's really nice is the interactive map. And this will be linked to INDOT's ESTIP and SPMS. So those of you who are familiar with SPMS, and it's not all of the
project management system.
Yes, it's the scheduling project management system for INDOT, and all of our projects within the NERC will show up on this map. Now, I started mapping all of these, and I was persuaded not to continue with it because once the SPMS and the consultant that we partnered with is also partnered with INDOT and is putting it together an ESTIP, which is a State Transportation Improvement Program, and it will map all of the projects that we have. So I will have to go back in here and remove all of these projects when the new ESTIP comes on. So there might be some overlap as I try to find these. But as you can see with this map, we've got just about all the projects, most of the projects I should say. You can click on a project and it'll show you what's going on with that project. For instance, here's another one, HMA overlay on State Road 49. This little dot down here is a bridge deck overlay on State Road 8. So on and so forth. This is the map portion, and this is where most people are going to go and find the projects that they need. We can click on it, and for instance, we want to look at just bike and pit. We can click on that layer. This is a GIS. So we can look at that. And there's this bike facility on US 30 that this is shown right here. Another good portion, interesting, we can look at the projects in any county, whether it's Porter County, as you can see, we have 3 bike and ped projects, 22 intersection projects, 33 transit projects going on in Porter County. We can look at all the counties, 2 of the counties. Here's Lake and Porter County, that takes them both in. So this is a really good portion, and then when the map comes in, you can see where these projects are. These are all of the projects within our TIP, and going through there, you can click on, say, the ID, which is the DES number, the designation number. It will rank them or put them in numerical order. Either way, you can do it by lead agency, by the title, or the project type. These are all the projects that we have again in our TIP. You can look at the amendments as they are proposed, as well as we can also look at these are the projects that are in the amendments. And again, you can look at, do an advanced search and look at any of these projects. How the funding, for instance, if you want to look up all the CMAQ projects, all the projects that have demonstration funds from INDOT, national highway interstate projects, so on and so forth. This program has got a really good base, and actually, I'm not even really sure on everything that it can do, and I'm still learning. But this is a really exciting program to help with the transparency and letting what's going on in our region.
Are there any questions for Charles?
The only thing I wanted to say, I mentioned to Ty, is when you click on transportation and get down to the RTIP, I think you owe it to the public to say what that is and not the acronym. Because it's a gold mine and you want them to get there and not have to understand what RTIP means first.
Okay. Well, if you click on it, it comes up here, but I mean, we can put that out.
To click on it, so that's my only recommendation.
Okay.
But it's wonderful, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles.
Yeah, to that end, we have other acronyms on that way. So maybe we want to just.
Yep.
It's not going to cost anything anymore. The final action is resolution, thank you, Charles. The final action is on resolution 1823, the fiscal year 2020-2024, notice of funding availability, otherwise known as NOVA. Mitch Prologa will tell you about this presentation, and that's located in your packet. And it starts on page 137.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Still.
I'm going to walk you through where we are at with the development of our NOFA, or Notice of Funding Availability. We have been working quite extensively over the last several months, and that was also summarized in a presentation I made before this commission regarding the progress that we have made. We have worked quite intensely with our topical committees, several hours with each one of them, regarding the background here, and today we are kind of presenting the entire package before you ahead of the actual solicitation, which we're hoping to have out sometime next week, maybe before Thanksgiving. So I'm going to run through these and get you up to speed. So the progress we have made thus far: we have identified all eligible funding types for federal funding. And we've been able to categorize project types into programs and identify eligible funding sources associated. Evaluate project types for their impact to our vision and goals. The critical paths, which are on the wall opposite me. We've completed that exercise. Now, based on the impact evaluation, we have grouped the projects into three major tiers for funding. And we've assigned available funding to the highest tier project types, which we will talk about and see if we will have a recommendation on that today. So today's action will involve we are going to be asking for approval of the NOFA today. Talk about the goals for the development of the 20 to 2024 TIP highway and transit programming rules for both Chicago, Michigan City, UZA. And these are actually in your packet. We're not going to go over those in detail today, but I just want to highlight that here. Talk about the funding targets of the 13 programs, the funding source assignments for each project type, and the process to reallocate funding to other programs and project types if not enough applications are received. Then the scoring criteria, I'll mention that briefly, which is unique to each of the programs. And then the timeline for this and future NOFAs. Now regarding the development goals, I believe one of your slides is missing over here. First of all, we wanted to propose enhanced programming rules to avoid future issues with TIP deficits due in part to projects failing to advance the project letting. It's been an issue in the past with our previous solicitations. We want to ensure consistency with state and fed programming requirements and better ensure no FWHA funds lapse back to INDOT or transit funds to the FTA. And make sure that we spend all the money we have here in the region. We will establish region-wide playbook for PE, professional engineering, right-of-way, and construction funding, and to ensure all sponsors are treated the same when and if they need amendments due to project development delays, which are inevitable in some cases, and then to increase transparency to sponsors and to the public through this process. Now, our other goal was to leverage all federal aid available to Northwest Indiana by providing a full view on all available funding sources to all project sponsors in the same NOFA. And this was an amount of $267 million that is in our current TIP program. So quite a few dollars, and we wanted to make sure that people understood what those projects were and where the dollars were going. Programming highway and transit projects in both Chicago and Michigan City UZAs at the same time. UZA is an acronym stating urbanized area, and we have two of them, as you know, in particular here that we fund separately, both the Chicago and the Michigan City UZA. And then develop a process that will be placed on a routine timeline, which is predictable and more transparent to sponsors and the public, replacing the previously periodic NOFAs that were funding and UZA based and had never fully programmed all federal funds available to Northwest Indiana. We definitely have leaks in the program, and we now have a process that we believe, although has taken a bit of time to get off the ground, will work for the region in far better capacity going forward. And then the goals also are better linked with regional priorities, a programming approach that evaluates all federal aid eligible projects for their impact on the vision of the region, and 2050 critical paths to achieve that vision. Project evaluation approach with refined evaluation criteria that is framed around 9 umbrella criteria that relate to the vision for the region. Performance-based planning focus, which is a highlight of the last couple transportation funding bills, and that we are trying to absorb a lot more readily into this system. So as for the rules themselves, they are located in your packet in the presentation at this time. There's about 5 or 6 pages that are regarding programming rules for highway, programming rules for transit. All I will mention at this time during the presentation is that we had an extensive amount of work done on this at the what we call our TROC, our Transportation Resource Oversight Committee, and we also spoke at length about these rules at the TPC on Tuesday. And for the sake of time, we will take questions on them if you have them at the conclusion of my presentation. And if you want to look through those, please feel free. But I wanted to, again, for the sake of time, continue to move forward with this presentation. And I wanted to talk about the important matter of funding targets regarding our project types in Northwest Indiana. There are several considerations to keep in mind when we talk about funding targets. First, project type scores are determined through new process, and this will, of course, help guide where to target the funding based on the process that we've been through, based on evaluating these projects over the last several months. Moving around, federal funding rules have to be taken into account, of course, need to be logical and efficient with assigning funding sources as we go through this exercise. We need to sustain funding necessary to support the system that we have. Some low-scoring project types still need to be funded. We want to keep that in mind. Just because it may score low doesn't mean it's out of the funding. It's just a matter of making sure our priorities are attended. Now, historical costs in programming are certainly taken into consideration. Consider typical costs of different project types to be logical with targets. We all understand not all projects are funded equally. Some projects need a bit more money than others. That's just common sense. And we make sure we bake that into these numbers. Now, anticipate future needs. Have to be sure targeted funding can be sustained over the long term. We also want to ensure fiscal constraint with our TIP. Must set targets with available funding in mind. And then logic to retarget any funds if not applied for. Funds will go to the next highest scoring program, which I will unpack with you momentarily. And then our TPC guidance. The TPC did recommend approval of this, and it is now before you today for the final approval here at the commission level. Now, I did want to highlight this, and again, as a matter of review, what has become known affectionately as a Skittle sheet. This is the multicolored matrix that takes the time to actually, and you don't have this in your packet, but it has been distributed beforehand. You only have kind of a sample of it. But this has taken the time to actually outline what the programs, what the project types are, and how they all relate up to our critical paths, as well as future scenarios and investment difficulty that has brought about the final score. This cutout from that kind of describes how we went about that originally, where we have the program category all the way to the left, followed by the type, and then the scoring, and the final score to the right. And keep in mind, when we have the program category, we have 13 of those in all, and we have over 80 plus project types. So we have several families of different programs, and of course, the project types fitting within those families. So as we get into the actual funding targets, we have a couple pages here to go over and to describe to you. And again, these are for your consideration this morning. We have, of course, the two different types of funding pots available here, the Chicago funding and the Michigan City funding, and that has been broken down accordingly. Now, as you can see here, what we did is we took the average score of those project types within that particular program, and that particular program was then using that average score that becomes the highest program in our consideration for the new funding. As you can see from this first page, that would be transit, and the transit part would be the operating assistance here. And there are 3 projects that are under this that do rank accordingly regarding their tier. And of course, tier 1, as I had mentioned before, based on the scoring that I previously mentioned, we kind of had the breakout there at, I believe, 66 points. Tier 2, the breakout is about 42 points. Everything below 41 received a tier 3 rating with the final scoring. Of course, where it is in the tier, what tier it does get assigned influences greatly the money that gets assigned to that project. So you can see, starting with the program itself, and I will just take as an example the transit and operating across the first category here with complementary paratransit. And again, I'm just going to give you one example, and hopefully you'll be able to decipher the rest. But going across, you see complementary transit. It did score very well, especially up against our critical paths. I did receive a tier 1 ranking, and the money that has been assigned to it, about $1.2 million for a particular funding year, and we have used the 5307 funding to make that work out. Now, also keep in mind where you see the targeted funding source. What we have tried to do with this exercise is to assign one funding source to one project type. We've had a lot of questions about that, and that has been something we have been taking into careful consideration. We understand, and I think all of you may understand, that different project funding categories, they can be flexible for many different types of projects. CMAQ is an example of that, where you can do roadway projects, you can do trail projects and the like. CTPG and of course TA has flexibility as well. Not as flexible are the transit monies, which are your 53 monies, 5307, 5337, and 5339 funding. And of course those, as you can see, are tailored quite exclusively to those transit programs. So we want to make sure that we keep that in mind. So we want to make sure through this process that we have identified the priority, that we have identified the scoring, and that we've assigned the funding again according based on those factors that I had previously mentioned. This is page 1 of this, and then page 2 goes into the further programs that have been identified for funding here. And what it does is that it concludes down with new roadways, and we had quite a few questions on that. As you can see, new roadways scored quite low in the evaluation, and it does end up as a tier 3 program score, and hence no funding has been assigned to that. Now, in all, we have several $1 million that have been assigned to both of these UCAs over a particular time frame. I'm going to get to those monies momentarily here. Actually, before I get to that, I just want to tidy up by saying, again, what we are proposing here is a template going forward, okay? And it might not be directly attributable dollar by dollar because of the money that we currently have in our 4-year or 5-year STP, and I'll get to that momentarily. But again, keep in mind that this is a template. The money that we're assigning can be prorated to different percentages. that we can use as we go forward in the subsequent years. And of course, as we go forward, we're going to have different monies than we have this year, of course, just depending on how things get approved down the line. So, funding reallocation logic, this is how it follows. A question arises quite often about what happens if applicants do not apply for all the funding targeted to a project type of program. Let's keep this idea in mind. The funding targets are just that, targets. These are not fixed amount by any stretch. Just because a particular project type doesn't have enough projects to fill that money doesn't mean that we just simply say, okay, we'll just carry that to the next year. First of all, we really can't do that. Number two, it's not fair to projects that could use the money down the line. So what we do in this process is within each program, any remaining funding for a project type will go to the next highest scoring project type. Of course, if it's eligible for the funding source. And until that program fully uses its targeted funds. So I told you before about, and I went back to the Skittles sheet for a reason to demonstrate to you the amount of programs that we have identified and all the project types within those programs. So keep in mind, when we go through this exercise, you have a family of project types under a program, and of course, not all of those project types might be able to fill that targeted amount, hence it'll continue to, yes, trickle down to the next project type. And the idea is after it gets out of that particular program, at the end of all those project types in that program, if there's money left over, it then folds into the next program, okay? And that's how this will work continuously all the way through the system until we have run out of money and we have programmed all of our dollars for our projects. So we want to make sure we keep that in mind as well. We understand that we might not have a full supply of projects to choose from in these categories, and so we have established this process for making sure that all the money is accounted for. Okay. So estimated funding available, this is really where we are at today. And as you can see, we have on here approximately 11.5 million total in Chicago UZA over the next 4 years, next 5 years that is, and then about 4.4 the next 5 years as well. So keep in mind that you see those funding targets that I have previously presented on, and again, that is to take into account a typical year where you have about roughly $50 million a year to work with. Again, this is transit, this is roadway monies, and then a bit less money in Michigan City. But in this case, this is what we have to deal with at this time because we are dealing with existing projects that have had to move along this system and that we've been having to try to find money for. And this is what we end up with. As you can see, we have an STPG monies, we have deficits, and then we finally do have a bit of a profit. We're in the black in 2024 for projects that we can actually fund. But you can see the deficits are quite heavy as we continue through here. And so we have to keep that in mind as we go through this process, that we only have about that much money to work with over the next 5 years in both of these UZAs. And again, the idea, what we want to make sure that you approve of today as a commission is the process, because we want to make sure we can continue this process forward, even though we have established these funding targets and they're not really going to be directly applicable to the NOFA, the call for projects that we have now. We are going to make sure that we prorate that accordingly as we go forward with this particular process. And again, when we talk about transit, we have a bit more money to work with transit. The way they program their money is different than the roadway monies, and they have a different system altogether, hence they have more money to work with over the next 5 years, as you can clearly see by this chart. Now, I just want to mention briefly about the scoring criteria. I talked about the color code sheet here. That was part one. The Skittles sheet was able to take your project types and put a score to them. Then that'll eventually help out with the monies that will be assigned to those particular project types. However, what do you do when a project type has projects come in? You need to rank them accordingly, and that's what we have done with all of our topical committees over the last several months, and I thank those who have been involved with it. Special medal to George Topol that actually sat through about 28 hours of all of this. Probably about longer than that, really, maybe 50 hours, but thank you, George. And thank you for your engagement. But we went through all this in high detail. You can see on this generally, you have 9 categories across the top, and then you have specific criteria on each of these vertical columns, and those match up again to these specific programs. So again, if you have a program, you have a family of project types in a program, and then they will be assigned to these particular scoring criteria. So at least we can understand what an apples-to-apples comparison is and to rank and score projects accordingly as they continue through the process. Now the timeline. For the current NOFA, here is the schedule that we were working under. If everything goes well and we do have this approved by the body today, then we will have the application out no later than Friday, November 23rd, which was of course pointed out to me to be a holiday, so we will try to get that out Wednesday, the 21st. And then on Thursday, the 29th, and also in early December, a couple of areas where we're going to be dealing with some internal meetings with INDOT on the tip itself. Now, what I did propose and what we did talk about at TPC is optional application workshop that will be hosted here at NERC on December 11th. To talk to all the project sponsors that are interested in applying for any project under this NOFA. We want to make sure that we are absolutely clear with them on the new process that we are establishing, and we want to make sure that we can talk to them and answer their questions about this. And to that extent, you can see the next thing, an optional pre-application scoping meeting will be made available on a one-to-one basis for any community or entity that would like to speak with staff about their particular project going forward. Now, the applications will be due to NERC by Friday, January 11th. And then we will have an internal review of these projects soon after, and then we will have these reviewed, scored, and fiscally constrained by the committees in the first week of February to get a draft tip due to INDOT. Please keep in mind, that's the big deadline that we were working under, the draft tip due to INDOT. We need to make sure we get that done. I know things seem a little rushed and crushed, but that is the timeline we are working under, and we want to make sure that we do allow enough time for the LPAs to get their projects to us, and of course enough time for us to talk with the LPAs to make sure that they apply the best project possible. Then after it is due, we then go through air quality conformity. This is internal work. Then we have a final draft reviewed by the TPC, and then we talk about any revisions, and then we have a 30-day public comment period that commences in April. And then finally, if all goes well, we vote to adopt the TIP as well as the next plan, the 2050 plan, in May of 2019. Now, this is the current NOFA. The next chart here talks about future NOFAs, a lot less legwork in the sense that we have done quite a bit of work regarding our critical paths. We've established all of these scores based on your skills review, and because of this, we can now just simply move forward with getting projects in the process, maybe doing some fine-tuning with the specific criteria, but from this point forward, we're hoping to have projects that a NOFA that would be open in mid-October or November, and again, same kind of deadline here regarding what we want to do with applications and giving the LPAs enough time to put together their proposed applications. So with that said, I know I have really talked a lot here and I've been quite detailed in much of the analysis. So on behalf of myself and my staff, I would like to at least take the time to answer the questions that come forward here. And my fellow staffers are here as well. James with the transit, and Scott with, where is Scott in here? Yeah, he's just like, hi, not really. Hi. Scott will talk about surface transportation matters. We have Kathy as well. She's going to talk about any type of issues regarding environmental policy. Of course, Charles is also here with finance. I'm here with non-motorized transportation.
For those who are attending, it's important to know that we're under deadline. December 11th is also TPC, the next TPC meeting. But that will be an opportunity for your staff to be involved in the workshop or application. So everything gets done on a timely basis. The staff has pretty much reformatted how we approach NOFA to make it more efficient in the future. New kind of guidances and pretty much a direction, I think, that's very positive. We'll spend out the accounts. We're not going to leave money on the table. At least that's some of our goal, is not to turn any money back. make sure it gets advanced and have some kind of consistent policies if we do switch monies around, that it eventually just gets spent here in Northwest Indiana.
Questions for Mitch? Ms. Nettecourt?
Yes, I have significant concerns with this resolution. And I want to say thank you to Mitch and certainly the work of the TPC. I think we have some significant concerns about this. One, when the TPC had taken this under consideration, dealing with transit, and specifically, if we go back on the chart, on the air quality, for transit vehicle emission reduction, new and modified, I believe there was discussion that non-transit diesel vehicles would be considered for that funding. It was not included in the version before us today. The other concern I have is the scoring of projects, road projects. I think you probably, if you went around the room and community by community, I think that you may find that a lot of projects that you worked very diligently for to get approved previously would not qualify under the current scoring. If the board would allow, I have my engineer here, I would like, from an engineering standpoint, if you would not object, to allow him to make a couple comments about the frustrations that I think some of the engineers of our communities are going to face dealing with this. Would you allow for just a minute?
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, our concerns and those of my colleagues that I've spoken to after some of our committee meetings, we think this is a fundamental change, in some ways very good, but in some ways it's going to make things like roadway expansion projects that communities need for economic development or to solve traffic problems impossible. And I know communities that are have finished the third phase of a 4-phase major project now feel like it's dead in the water. Phase 4 is never going to happen because the money's not there. The regional corridor study is now not going to be funded. There's no money allocated for that. Some of the dollar amounts, the Safe Routes to Schools having $50,000 a year, who's ever going to apply for that? When you have to buy a square foot at an intersection because the sidewalk is taking a square foot of property, and you have to pay $3,500 in right-of-way engineering services to buy that 1 square foot that's probably worth $25. How does $50,000 help? Just do it yourself. And I agree with Mitch that some of the low-scoring projects, I appreciate the fact that that when we went through all of the Skittle sheet and rate projects, we realized that there was a fundamental problem in what happened there, because some of the low-scoring projects have to be constructed. We rely on those projects as communities to get them done, and we've looked to NERC to do that. And I and a number of other engineers, consultants, and municipal engineers that I've talked to are very concerned that that's coming to an end. And we're no longer going to be able to look to NERC in this federal program to help fund things like Hobart 61st Avenue project. Thank God our third phase is done, because if this goes forward, it seems like that would never be funded now. With the dollar amounts allocated to, one of the federal projects we're looking at, one of the things we intended to apply for was an $8 million intersection project. Okay, and if $1.7 million is out of CMAQ per year for that intersection project, and there's a NOFA every year, we could theoretically apply for 3 years in a row, and as long as we win every dollar in that category for 3 years in a row, our project will get funded. But the first year we were accepted, we have to financially commit to the other $6.3 million to get the $1.7 million. And that is going to be a major problem. So I understand we're under a deadline, and I understand that we need to get this done, we need to get this NOFA through. It's a small one, we don't have a whole lot of money. But when this is done, we need to go back to the beginning somewhere and reevaluate how we got to where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mitch?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Looking over the chart here, I mean, if you look over the red, it looks like all the road projects and the road improvement projects have dropped down into the red zone, which has had very little rating. I guess my question is, why are we getting away from road work projects and construction projects and pushing more of our rating into the livables, the environmentals, the transits, the bike trails and stuff like that? Whereas before, it seemed like our roads and our road projects were a top priority for this fund.
I can answer that in the sense that we have a new series of critical paths again that's on the wall here opposite me. And this is the first time that we've actually taken the time to go through all of the different project types that are available and go through this process. We did this at great extent and pretty much went through each one of these 16 for each one of the project types and did our best at each of these levels to evaluate it, and this is how it came out. I guess a lot of the roadways probably don't match a lot of the visions and goals that we are proposing here in our super critical paths, and again, this is how the topical committees reviewed, and this is what they came to their final conclusion on. So, it was a very extensive process, very unique, and you're right, in the past, roads were king, and they got quite a bit of the money, but we're looking at a new process that's trying to match more of the values and goals of this region to what we want to do with our money. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
I guess the other thing that I would add to that is that on the far right of the Skittle sheet is the columns for the columns of money. And so the roads only qualify for, there's some of those columns on the far right that only roads will qualify for. And there's others that, there's some mismatch. So I don't know that that's helpful. But
I do want to make it, I need to clarify as well. Phil had talked about the safe routes and he's mentioning $50,000, but this goes towards the hiring of coordinators. It's not an infrastructure project. In fact, the other one says non-infrastructure for $50,000, which is just simply a planning effort as well. But what I also want to make sure you're clear about is that's under the TA program, and that's very specific to TA. And again, you can't do major infrastructure projects at TA. It's kind of a bike and head and sidewalks in the most part. So again, it's not. So you have to keep that in mind too when you get to the funding source that we're looking to target for these and how we can spread that out best for the projects that came out of this exercise.
If I could just add, sorry, what Mitch said, just to underscore it too, part of the input process with this and the scoring that this all came about as a result of the input that was received also has to do with this great focus on quality of place in the region. The fact that these are still all transportation-related projects because they're transportation funding, but the orientation isn't necessarily roads per se, and the ones that the region actually said they were most interested in trying to make sure they got funded. It all goes to this attention to place and the economic development efforts that are happening in Northwest Indiana.
I'll just say lastly is that, at least from my perspective, as I sat in on every one of these meetings and went through every one of those squares and every one of these project types, I have a deep appreciation for those who took the time from all the committees to look at this. I believe their analysis was very fair, and I believe they were very critical of each other as they went through this in relation to the other project types that wasn't, try to grab all the points that they could get. I think all the analysis was very effective, and I believe what we went through for this first go-around, I think, did the job to this point at where we're at today. So I'm very happy about how
this first go-around. We need to revisit this constantly. This isn't the end, this is the beginning. And there's different issues that come up. For example, Tuesday, bridge replacement and rehabilitation been overlooked. That was reintroduced, and that's a part of this, just for instance. So there are elements that concern all of us, and I'll tell you, these meetings were pretty well attended by all the city engineers and the transit people, the environmental people were looking at the CMAQ funds. There's a lot of discussion, disparity maybe about how these money should be spent. But I think in the end, we reach some equity, some fairness in how we're approaching it. We shouldn't lose our long-term goals as individual communities, but at the same time, we got to look at region-wide, what are we doing with all these monies?
So I was going to ask Mayor Snedeker if the word in that air quality section on the line that says transit vehicle emission reduction newer mod, if it just said vehicle instead of transit, then other ones would apply. That would not exclude the transit, but it would also not exclude.
And I don't think
the school
anybody's
bus.
asking to exclude the transit. I think what the feeling was is that non-transit should have the ability to apply for the funds.
So what I'm asking you is if we remove the word transit on that one line, would then you be happy?
I believe that'd be acceptable.
We had the discussion at TPC too, because Kathy brought up the municipalities, and we had a discussion with the transit operators, that this is also a possibility for emission reduction. So I appreciate your input and making the rest of the communities aware that these are some of the things we really hope are pursued.
And no disrespect to the transits, but I believe there's other pots of money that they could apply for in addition to this. So, I mean, we're not throwing them out. We want them to be a part of it. But
And Moniker, you're not excluding them.
That's correct.
We're trying to be more all-inclusive and trying to, assign more opportunities.
I would concur.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, as a member of the Environmental Policy Committee, we never talked about limiting it to transit, that it's going to be eligible diesel.
Is there any other questions?
Just one more comment too, as far as the roads go. I mean, the bottom line is there's not enough money to do everything the region needs to do. I mean, that's just the reality. And I think we all know that. The difficulty is how do you prioritize what the region does want. And what NERC uses the federal funds that they have access to fund versus other revenue that might be available. And so not that it fixes all problems, but we're extremely grateful for the road funding bill that was passed and the community crossings program that NDOT has done and is continuing to do. So, and that is intended to continue. So, just to not be quite as dire a picture, there are funds available that don't come from NERC that are now available to communities that didn't have those before. So it is a larger kind of overall sort of thing we're trying to address here.
You're kind of on the right track. The problem is we do have more opportunities, but the batches are getting bigger. Community crossings, wonderful program, like the state of Indiana, but there's an increased match over how we operate in the past, so that's more. But it's something.
If I may add to the community crossings, though, in all due respect, and we appreciate every dollar we've received from community crossings, but every municipality in Lake County, other than I think Whiting, got $0 this round for community crossings. And we've not really received a real good reason why, but we applied and we had certainly eligible projects to consider, but for some reason, all the municipalities other than I think Whiting got shut out this time around. So that's a big hit because we had anticipated at least some funding and we got $0. And Gary got $0, Hammond got $0, East Chicago, we all were shut out.
I just had a question about how this plays into at least the environmental aspects of the plan, how it plays into the Volkswagen Trust settlement and recommendation. Is there any intersection here?
See, is Kathy here?
Well, the Volkswagen Trust, they haven't actually done any project. People haven't even, I believe, been able to, project applications aren't available yet.
Right.
So clearly, if folks receive funding, they can use that for match. Ideally, they can leverage that and minimize them. And to be clear, I don't believe we have the actual money for new projects until like 2024. On the highway, on the CMAQ highway side. So by the time we would actually have money to fund new projects and allocate, that we would know what people are getting from Volkswagen, and so we can program accordingly.
Back into the Mayor Slendercourt's comment. One or two of the workshops that I went to in regards to the community crossings, they strongly advised at that time that you should break your applications into segments so that if one portion of the application was unacceptable, it could be eliminated. And the way it was explained to me, although we received one, we had 6 different pieces, any of which was independent of the other. But when they were related somehow to one big project, if there was any flaw in that particular application,
It should all flow. That's my understanding also.
So if that needs to be tweaked, then if you lost one part of it,
You lost it all. Yeah, that's my understanding.
that's all.
Okay. Anybody else? Tom, you want to make a change or make a motion?
Mayor Seneca, what would you recommend the motion second? I know you specifically were asking about public works vehicles.
Yeah, certainly, I think we got the wording to handle the diesel-related application for the communities. As far as the scoring for potential projects, if that's a work in progress, maybe that's how we treat it, but what's approved this round will be all the way through 24, correct?
The idea is the scoring that you see here will carry for the next 4 years.
So if you make an approval today, we're bound by this for 4 years.
Things can always be changed.
We can always change it.
I mean, if there's enough, we're going to go through this for the first time, and so after we're done with this, there might be changes necessary. So we're not going to lock it in, but it is our hope that we can keep it quite stable.
There will be changes. There will be. But I think they can adjust and just do this forward.
I don't want to take light of all the hard work that's been done here. I was in on part of it, but I just want to make sure that we don't restrict our ability for projects that have necessity within the region. Sometimes we can examine things that can be counterproductive to the region as far as projects. And I just want to make sure that projects don't get denied because of some technicality that is part of the scoring system. I just want to make sure that we continue to work on this. So with that said, I think we're under a time restraint.
I got a question. If it's approved today, does it still have to be approved by the full commission at a future meeting?
No, this one can be the executive board.
Good question. I would be willing to support what we have, given I take the mayor's point, given the review of the process would possibly lend to some alterations in the process if needed. And I think that this body or the PBC could make those adjustments as they come up. Just because this would be a framework, a goal to have in place for a period of years doesn't mean in the meantime we can't adjust it. I would support it with that understanding that it could be modified if we run into a hill of sand and we can't get up.
Do you understand his request on that line now by removing the one word, other vehicles are?
That part I have no issue with.
Okay.
You guys lost me a long time.
I will tell you that TPC did recommend the adoption of Resolution 1823.
I would recommend with the amendment, as so stated in regards to
air quality.
Where's that at?
You got the line? It's on page 162, and it says air quality, and the second line is, it currently says transit vehicle emission reduction, new or mod, and the suggestion is to remove the word transit, so that other vehicles, like a school bus or something else, could use.
So moved. Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to concur with Mr. Tunn's comments about the review process. And be something that we included in this bill.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, so I think that it's noticed, I mean, the review process, it will continue to be reviewed, and it's been
Assuming that's self-initiated, I mean, at such time as there perceives to be a need, that will go forward, and this will be brought back to us.
I'm just wondering whether we need a friendly amendment to the motion, or if it's just included.
I think it's included in
Okay.
what we've done here.
Okay.
There's a process in place to review and amend that, and when that's triggered, and then it would come back to us. Although this one change, you can certainly accept as part of the motion.
I'll make a friendly amendment to the motion with the exceedance of the mayor.
I have no problem with that.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Who's it second?
Yeah. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, there you go.
Thank you all, and thank the committees for doing the work, and everybody that participated in this work.
Thanks.
And it's only the beginning, not the end. The next TPC meeting will be December 11th. I urge the communities to have their engineers or staff be present, specifically for any preparation for the new grants. Also, we will have a complete streets policy workshop in this room on December 7th, 2018. That'll go from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the charge is going to be, I think, $30, Mitch?
Yeah.
But please have your staffs, your people participate in the streets as well, because it helps with this communication and understanding.
While you're on it, I just want to emphasize again, what we're looking to accomplish is, if your community does not have a complete streets policy, you will walk out with a draft policy. That is the idea of this. We're going to work through this with you. We're going to help you bring this pretty much, make it council friendly. Hopefully we'll get a few more policies out and approved in this region, other than, of course, for us.
A few more approved and some more improved, because there's a lot of things going on with this. Conclusion of report.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Can you tell us again what the change was and what?
Page 182 in air.
I don't have it.
Well, then, it's 20 pages into my imagination. 162.
62?
Yeah, it's a good year. In the section air quality, on the second line of that, it says transit vehicle emission reduction. You don't have?
It's one of the last pages, though. It's like,
It might be,
Okay.
Got it? 162, and where it says air quality, transit vehicle emission reduction, new or mod, the word transit has been removed. So it just would read vehicle emission reduction, new or mod.
Vehicle emission reduction.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
Can I just add real quick in the spirit of that review, as we do the NOFA, we're more than please, comments and throughout this whole process are more than welcome in that. As we solicit the feedback or the input from the NOFA and the actual projects, please, your comments continue to be valuable. Try to enhance this process.
Okay. Next is Legislative Committee, Mary Tanis.
It'll be short and sweet. We had a legislative meeting that was sparsely attended. We we rope George into it for a few minutes. But I do want to call your attention to a couple of things. AIM is having a roundtable December the 5th at Teebles. Please, I invite everyone to go there because that is the one group that's really going to help us as far as the state is concerned. Also, there's a redevelopment of Indiana meeting on December the 14th at AIM headquarters in Indianapolis. We also need to be aware of what's going on with the federal, with the FTA for double tracking in the Westlake corridor. We need to keep an eye out on that. And also the TVV plans that are going to be coming up very quickly, which do affect those of us that are on the transit plans for the trains. I do appreciate everybody's help, and hopefully, we'll get on track again in the new year for the legislative committee and have a few more meetings that will help everybody in this room. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Next is a report of INDOT. Rick Powers.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It snowed this morning.
Nice. I found out.
It's probably going to do it again. Actually, it is. We need drivers. I think I told you that before. So again, if in this time, in this climate of everybody in economic growth, everybody seems to have a job. But if you need people that need jobs, send them our way. Someone mentioned, I believe the mayor did, who left community crossings. I know many of you got sad letters from me. I sent far more of those this year than I did, I think, awards the first year. And I remember the second year of the program, sitting in a room with leadership wondering, okay, we got to be very careful how we message this. Could happen because the first year we left a few dollars on the table. Because people, quite frankly, in communities, I don't know, fully understood, didn't do the kitchen table drill. But yeah, we had a town, you may recall, Onward, in that first year. Onward, people don't even know where Onward is, being a recipient of Community Crossings funds. Well, this year there were 444, I believe, communities, and as I told them that year, I said, believe me, we will have no problem in the second year with this program because of what happened the first year. It was popular. It was as if we put up billboards just because of its success. That's what we're seeing. Competition is key. I can say that a lot of different ways. Scoring, they tried to share the wealth, if you will, to a degree in this round to some communities that had not been awarded previously. To Mr. Tunn's point, as we've learned with some of our own projects, I would say it akin to bundling, and what we've done to where we have an unintended consequence within a point of bundling where one project interferes with another because of some environmental point where you wonder why it's a downstream issue. It shouldn't be, but it is because it's bundled. When you bring your projects in to that degree, something like that can disqualify a project where you have too many moving parts, if you will. So I would say this is our third iteration, but it's growing and evolving. And it is going to perpetuate. And again, I would say if Representative Soliday were here, keep in mind what they did in the last session to open up different funding resources to locals. So again, which makes it even more competitive because now there's a greater opportunity to match. So as those things happen, competition is increasing. It's quite frankly the point to make. And I think as we evolve and keep going, keep in mind we do 2 calls now. One's coming up in January. So think positively, if I can bring you some sense of positivity about it. You will have an opportunity again very soon, and again in July of next year, since we're doing 2. So I understand to the degree, again, that I always remind you that I came from a local, and it feels a little disheartening when you hear from the state no. But keep in mind, we are perpetuating this program. It is funded, it is fully funded. We intend to continue to do what we're doing. Good work is being done with it. And again, to the cities that made it, I believe there were like 283 cities that did receive the $100 million this round. So we can anticipate that in January, and that maybe your project will make it. So I don't want anybody to be disheartened by it. Again, I was sort of disheartened. One, I had to sign all the letters, and it's this district, and I feel very passionate about what you're trying to do, and again, this group. It's good work you do. So please resubmit. Don't lose heart. Keep your head down. Lean into it as we do, and your good work will pay off, I'm sure. So that being said, I guess I would go on to local tracks. We're expecting an announcement. I've heard now it may go into December. It was going to be the end of November, but actually just heard yesterday that could be pushed into December. Is that correct? I guess somebody, I know, Lisa, you back here?
Yeah, right now they are reaching out to the railroads to discuss and negotiate possible additional match, and they're hoping to, their goal is for at the end of December to
That's,
get that
I
out.
know we were trying for initially for November, but I thought it was going to be pushed. I just heard that, so thank you, Lisa, for confirming that. So those of you, again, I know we're interested here in that regard too, so forthcoming, we'll have an announcement. Hopefully we do well there and see how it goes. Moving on to projects, even though it did snow, cones are still out. The I-65 expansion is nearing completion. We hope it'll be done by the end of the month, barring any major issues. And I've already talked to you about our need for drivers. So if you have a question for me, I think I'm done.
Great.
When you indicated 283 cities, should that be cities and towns?
Cities and towns, I'm sorry. Thank you. Cities, towns, and counties. Okay. Sorry.
Is that stored public on how the projects are scored?
Lisa, are community crossings scored
Yes,
public?
I believe they are published, and right now, what they're working through is Marcia Blanzett. She is working on reaching out to the LPAs to discuss some of the concerns that they had, in hopes that we can improve for the January call. So, but I believe it is on the public website, yes.
Maybe I'm ahead of myself, but could you have somebody come to TPC and maybe make a short presentation on the community crossings?
Absolutely, we could probably get Marcia.
Give an opportunity presentation to the community.
Yeah, we can make that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's again, that's why we do the workshops. I mean, if we can coach someone into qualification, that would be preferable. We want projects to score well. Again, I akin this to any other project. If somebody in an engineering community needs help in writing an LOI or something, no issue at all sitting down with someone saying, this is where you could close the gap. Again, some of the things that we picked up in the workshops, I strongly urge you that when we host a workshop, come, because there's probably a change. There's probably something different. I mean, I've watched Kathy McCallum go through 3 of these now, and each time there's sometimes a subtle change, at that point a project interjection. Sometimes there's some major changing in funding. So when those are announced, please come, or please send the people that are making your designs, I guess, or submitting your design, please attend. But yes, we can.
It's a tough on the engineers when we change things.
Absolutely.
Speaking of
I would say this.
More flexible than most. I'm
I
not
was going
that
to say,
flexible.
you're not all linear, but some are.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other commission business, Tom?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As everybody remember, last month we talked about a task force regarding the railroad crossings. I'm happy to announce we have our first meeting. I'm also very happy to announce that Mitch Marlogan is going to be my staff member that's working with me on this. I need his expertise, and I'm asking for cooperation from my fellow commissioners if you want to be part of this railroad task force. Our first meeting is December 17th, right here at Herbsey at 1:30 is what we decided, right? Yep. So December 17th, we're going to have a meeting here. All NERC commissioners and city engineers would be very valuable, are invited. Anybody that can help. If you're a member of the public and you want to help with us, you're invited. We hope to get on the radar for our train operators so that they understand that we have a problem and give them particular areas where we have problems. And we hope also to possibly get federal help. I know Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, who's not here, but she was recently elected. Oh, she? I'm sorry. Good to see you. She was recently elected mayor of National League of Cities. Congratulations on that. And also Jeff Benson, our chairman of NERC, is the president of NARC. And so between Mayor Karen and Jeff, maybe we could get some, legislation proposed and start trying to tackle this problem from the federal level where it has to happen. So again, it's December 17th. The task force meets at 1:30 right here. If you want to be part of it, please show up and bring your engineer and be ready to talk about specific areas where we have problems. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I encourage that, but one thing we all have to be mindful of too is the industry's going to be changing pretty dramatically. We're going to have autonomous trains in the very near future. I'd go ahead and do what we're doing because it could be 5 years, it could be 10 or 15 years. But already there are navigation companies setting up across the country for autonomous cars and autonomous trains, planes, etc. And it's just amazing that when you hear those trains, they won't be stopping at all.
Without be yelling at a robot.
You'll have a bunch of new issues because we won't know who to address. We can't catch a conductor or a train engineer.
Thank you. So I hope everybody can be a part of this. I think it's a good idea.
Any other commission business?
Yes.
Commission business.
On local government, at our last redevelopment commission, one of the Hanover School Board members addressed us, and he's a former fire chief. And he said his heart is broken over the 3 kids that were killed by somebody running the stop sign of a bus. They asked me to come here and see what other communities are doing to enforce the law. Like there's an article in the paper that Valpo, the Porter County Sheriff's Department, is teaming up with the police in Valpo, Chesterton, and Heber to crack down on some of this. What he asked us to do is put some signs up on US 41 to try and get some people to honor the law and not run those stop signs when they're out. What is other communities doing?
I can tell you that Dyer PD is working closely with Lake Central, and they just did a whole program about that very issue. So Lake Central is on it together with Dyer Police Department.
Squad cars following the buses. And security officers on the buses.
Yeah, I saw that. But are signs something good to put up? Like the state put some signs up on US 41?
There's a regular sign that says when a school bus stops, all 4 lanes stop. I've seen that sign.
When we go into engineering, we just talked about engineers and their thought process relative to school safety. In fact, when you go out on 20, there's a particular, it's actually a private school, it's an academy, that we have engineered to try to warn people that the school exists. Lighting, rumble strips, turn lanes, the safety of our children. Anytime something tragic happens, I think it makes us all take, stop, think, and say, what more can we do? I don't know if that type of education, anything we can do to educate the public is going to help. And to this minute, I don't know what happened, so it would be wrong for me to cast judgment on any point of any part of that incident or any incident, quite frankly, without knowing the facts. But it's all about our awareness when it comes to school buses. I mean, it's the one thing that, if you think about it, for those of us that have been involved in law enforcement and or been to an emergency vehicle operation course, it's the one thing that a vehicle in an emergency operation will yield to is a school bus with flashing lights. Okay, all other things, you blow lights, you go through intersections, you do all things. When the school bus stops with its lights on, an emergency vehicle stops. So it's that important, and I think that's the key. It has to be that important. It becomes an enforcement point, it becomes a point of awareness, it becomes a point of putting our phones down in a moving vehicle. Again, not being speculative, just don't know, it's just that day and age. And those types of things need to be awareness. So I would say we are willing to do whatever it takes to protect children. But I think everyone needs to do whatever it takes to protect children in those operations.
Thank you.
One kid dying is too many.
Yep, absolutely. Announcements.
I'd like to make a remembrance of Rick Fratascia, who passed away, former superintendent at Union Township Schools and Valpo Schools, and a friend of not only Porter County, but all the area. And a lot of people on this road. Very much so.
As this got passed around, thank you for the discussion on the meetings. And even though we will continue to have executive board meetings, these dates that were listed for the full commission meetings will still be planned as the full commission days. So we'll lock these into your calendar. And on that note, I just again appreciated the discussion and appreciate the effort that you made to get here today despite snow. And I'll end on this note is that it actually speaks really well, I think, for the region that you all want to continue, that you value coming together and want to keep coming together on a regular basis. I think that really says a lot about how far the region has come.
Will we have to have a meeting in December to have the full commission?
No, it will be in January. So they can keep operating on the budget they have and ties contracts that we approve or recommended for approval overlap so that everything is fine, so we can wait till January. The next meeting is January 17th here at 9 a.m. I want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays.
And to remind you that there is cake following for Jody.
For lunch. Do you have anything, Bob? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
All of them are staying on. My butt is flat.